Hello everyone. Today's video is on a TikToker named Classy Fat Babe. I don't know her actual name, but she's an interesting one, so let's go.
But according to some folks, me being happy about my weight loss equates to me being fatphobic.
Wow, there is so much to unpack here. So this creator lost a lot of weight, saying that it was part of their health journey. By the way, they don't have pronouns in their bio, so I'm just going to use the pronouns they, them. And they're upset because people keep saying that they have an eating disorder when they don't. And they're upset that people are calling them fatphobic for being proud of their weight loss. They also go on to say that body positivity is about celebrating all bodies and that they're frustrated that they are being ignored or discarded in that movement because they're thin now. So let me begin by saying that the body positivity movement is not a self-love movement. It's an intersectional civil rights movement for people of color, queer people, disabled people, and fat people. It's specifically for people who exist in marginalized bodies. Thin people appropriated the movement and turned it into being about self-love.
So let me start off by saying that fuck this idea that body positivity is some sort of intersectional movement made for all marginalized people. If a black, lesbian, trans, disabled woman went on TikTok being excited about her weight loss, your body positivity movement would tear her to shreds as fast as they did this person. So it's a pretty huge slap in the face to call fat acceptance or body positivity an intersectional movement. This entire TikTok is 3 minutes long, and it is infuriating. So instead of watching the whole thing, I'm going to intersperse sections of this TikTok throughout the entire video, because I couldn't stand to watch the entire thing in one sitting, and I don't want my followers to have to do that either. So we'll take it in small doses together.
Because this video is longer than a minute, you probably couldn't hear that stitch. It's that joke where people go, "Babe, would you still love me if I was fat?" And then the guy goes, "Yeah, of course I would." And then the kid goes, "But mom, you are fat." I hate that trend. It is arguably one of the worst and most fatphobic TikTok trends of 2021. I didn't have the spoons to talk about it until now, so here we go. This sound is an easy joke to make when you're in a thin body, and thin people do actually ask for this kind of reassurance in their relationships. And the reason why it's so toxic and fatphobic and offensive is because it furthers the narrative that fat women are unlovable. I have heard countless stories of fat people staying in toxic and frankly abusive relationships because they had been force-fed this narrative that fat people are unlovable. And I'm one of them. It wasn't an official relationship, but I stayed in a toxic, intimate situation because I felt that I owed this man my body, time, and attention because he gave me the time of day, simply because I thought that I was unlovable and desirable because of my body size. And even further on, when thin men would fetishize my body and say things like, "I love fat girls. I've always wanted to fuck a fat girl." I was legitimately flattered by that because that was the only kind of positive attention towards my body that I had known since becoming fat. And it wasn't until I started recovery from my eating disorder that I began to unpack my internalized fat phobia and respect my body and my worth.
So she has a problem with this whole skit trend, but isn't the purpose of the child at the end saying, "You are fat," meant to signify that her husband loves her even though some people say she's fat? That's kind of what I thought the whole skit was. She says it furthers the idea that fat women are unlovable, but it actually does the opposite. The point of the skit seems to be, 1, acknowledging that this idea that fat women can't be loved in society exists, which is important for getting rid of the narrative, and 2, that it isn't true by the husband saying, "Of course I'd still love you," and the kid saying, "But you're already fat." So to say that it reinforces the idea that fat women are unlovable means you clearly misunderstood the message. And I really don't understand what she would have rather had the trend be. She said it brought up the dynamic she dislikes, and then it pushes against that, but it's still problematic because, what? It features thin, conventionally attractive people? This all feels like jealousy because the women in the skits are thinner than she is. And the rest of the video, she's talking about fixing her low self-esteem she had from feeling ugly, which is good. It's good to feel good about yourself and not stay in unhealthy relationships. But I don't feel like anything she said was contrary to the sentiment in the video she was negatively criticizing. In fact, it seems like the video affirms what she's saying about being in healthy relationships. And it seems like this is another instance of her just being jealous that thinner women seem to be getting more love and validation than she is. Especially because she also mentioned that she didn't like being objectified and seen as unworthy of romance by men because of her size. So, yeah, the whole thing just reeks of jealousy.
But even people who are in marginalized bodies, if they are not fat, they should not be participating in discussions about size-based oppression unless they are being supportive or uplifting our voices. So yes, the fact that this creator is now thin does mean that discussions around size within body positive spaces are no longer available to them. Again, unless they're there to uplift fat voices and offer support.
The fat acceptance movement is always saying that people need to listen to fat people and their experiences. But according to this woman, your lived experiences as a fat person are all negated and irrelevant the second you lose weight. Which is something that anyone who knows anything about the fat acceptance movement already knows, because look at how they treat people who have lost weight. Look at Rebel Wilson or Adele. But how does it make sense that your thoughts and opinions on size-based issues are only allowed to be heard or listened to if you are currently fat? How does it make sense that if I spent 30 years being fat and then 1 year being skinny, anything I say about my experiences over those 30 years that I was fat is irrelevant? This doesn't even work for something like being poor. If you were in poverty for 20 years of your life and then you made it out of poverty and you're now rich, does that mean that all of your experiences while you were in poverty are irrelevant? Like, I don't understand.
Hot takes for no nuance November.
Okay, because she's going to give no nuanced takes, I think my responses should be the same.
The majority of intentions behind weight loss are fatphobic.
Being fat is unhealthy, so people should be afraid of it.
Every fatphobic troll in my comments section is less healthy than I am, regardless of their body size. I'm worried about your psychological health.
You care about the mental health of your trolls? Who's concerned trolling now? If I was in your comments saying I'm concerned about your health because of your size, I'm a concerned troll. But if someone comments that you're still worried about their mental well-being, come on.
If your preference excludes an entire marginalized group, including fat people, it's not a preference, it's bigotry. I don't care if you're respectful to my face. A fatphobic bigot is still a bigot.
It's not bigotry to not want to date someone that is unhealthy. And basic respect does not mean attraction.
The word obese is not a medical term.
The word obese is a medical term.
Former fat people are some of the most annoying fatphobic people out there.
Saying former fat people are annoying and fatphobic is your way of coping with your own envy towards people that have done what you refuse to do, and because they seem a lot happier because of it.
Boycott Torrid.
Sure. Why the hell not?
Small and medium fats do have thin privilege.
It's a privilege to have enough food to get fat, and then also have enough time to complain about the consequences of that decision on the internet.
Mid-size is a fatphobic term.
Thin privilege is a thinphobic term. Whew. Glad I got all that off my chest.
And clearly this creator is silencing fat people. They say that fat phobia was made clear to them based on how they were treated when they were fat versus when they were thin. But they also put air quotes around the word fat phobic. So it's really interesting how they are aware of fat phobia, except for when they're being called out on how they're perpetuating fat phobia.
This is the section of the video that she's referring to with air quotes.
Over the past year, I have worked hard, put in discipline, tested my self-worth to lose 120 pounds. Let me reiterate, this was a conscious decision for my personal health. And because I put so much work into it, I'm gonna flaunt it because I'm proud of a personal health advancement. But according to some folks, me being happy about my weight loss equates to me being fat. It's also worth mentioning that I am very much aware of fat phobia in society. In fact, it's been proven to me through my weight.
Yes, he put air quotes around fat phobia because it isn't fat phobic to intentionally lose weight and be proud of it. But all he said was that he was treated differently at different sizes, but that intentional weight loss shouldn't be considered fatphobic. He's acknowledging what most people would consider actual fat phobia, and that isn't silencing fat people.
One of the things I talk a lot about on the Clock app are thin people and how they discuss their insecurities. I talk a lot about how the ways and spaces that thin people express their insecurities are inappropriate or even sometimes flat out toxic and traumatic. I recognize that a lot of that is unintentional, but sometimes I get negative responses when I am trying to educate. These responses often look like things like, well, thin people have eating disorders and body dysmorphia, or what are some appropriate ways and spaces for thin people to express those insecurities? So this video is a response to those comments and questions. First, I just want to note that fat people also have eating disorders and body dysmorphia that are largely caused by fat phobia, and that eating disorders and body dysmorphia are not an excuse to perpetuate oppression. Fat phobia is oppression, and it is very traumatic to fat people. So here we go. First of all, non-weight-based insecurities like your hair or your height. Those are totally fine to share, just not in body positive spaces, because body positivity is a movement that was created for the advocacy and fight for the rights of marginalized people, especially fat people. Those spaces need to remain open to that fight. However, those insecurities can totally be shared in self-love and body neutrality spaces.
Okay, she said body insecurities are fine to talk about as long as they aren't weight-related. But first of all, why are weight-related insecurities separate from all other insecurities in how people are allowed to talk about them? And second, there are also people that say it's wrong to talk about belly fat or stretch marks. Those aren't directly weight-related, but many thin people have gotten told that it's inappropriate in the body positivity movement to talk about those things. So it seems like the goalpost keeps moving on what is acceptable. And also, in this original video that this woman stitched, this guy is talking about his weight loss and how he has a lot of stretch marks and loose skin from his 120-pound weight loss, and that's why he should still be in body positivity, because he still wants to be positive about those things. And yet she's still saying that he's not allowed in body positivity.
I still have battle scars from my weight loss. I still have stretch marks, loose skin, things from my weight loss that I will live with forever. But apparently that's just erased from the body positivity movement because I'm thin now.
And what is the difference between body positive spaces and body neutral spaces and self-love spaces? Like, how do we distinguish these? Like, real questions. Because she said those are the spaces thin people are allowed to roam free, if you will. But I've seen thin people that haven't used the body positivity hashtag and have instead used the body dysmorphia hashtag and have still gotten told that talking about their insecurities is inappropriate in that space. So I would like a list, a full list distinguishing the difference between where thin people are and are not allowed to talk about their insecurities on the internet.
So the first thing to keep in mind is your headspace. If you know you're going to get defensive when fat people give you feedback on the way that you're talking about your body size, just don't do it. If that is the case, then that should be expressed in therapy, in a journal, or with trusted friends one-on-one. If you are open to feedback, however, then the first thing you need to include is a trigger warning, because that will give everybody the agency to scroll on by if they're not in a place where they can hear and see that kind of content. Secondly, the content should not revolve around reassuring yourself that you're not fat. Third, be very intentional about the language you use. Phrases like "I feel fat" are highly offensive because it implies that the fat experience is about feelings and mental illness rather than actual oppression and even sometimes joy. And lastly, you should not only be speaking on this topic when it benefits you. So like when you're expressing your insecurities. You also need to make content being supportive of fat people and calling other people out on their fat phobia. Feel free to ask other questions in the comments section.
Statement about the fat experience being about oppression and not mental illness or feelings or even joy has thrown me for a loop, and I have no clue how to process any of that. I'm gonna leave that for the comments for you to discuss what that meant. But aside from that, apparently any thin person that talks about their body openly on the internet is allowed to be criticized for it. And if I'm not okay with that, then I have to stay off the internet and go get a journal? So she's allowed to talk about her insecurities, and she shouldn't get criticism for it because it's her lived experience. But thin people's insecurities can only be expressed in places she deems acceptable. What? And this whole trigger warning thing is ridiculous. The most minor bodily insecurities could be sensitive subjects for anyone. But people shouldn't have to put a trigger warning for every insecurity. I've said it before, and I'm sure I'll say it again, but if a piece of content, like someone talking about their stomach or their cellulite or anything like that, doesn't pertain to you or resonate with you, then move on. People shouldn't have to tiptoe around your insecurities to be able to openly speak on the internet. And just so we're clear, the entire list of rules for thin people is 1. You can't talk about weight-related issues unless you're willing to take criticism from all fat people, or else take your issues off the internet. 2. You have to put a trigger warning when you talk about any insecurity. 3. Don't use phrases like, I feel fat, or any other phrases that could possibly anger fat people. And 4. You must also create content uplifting and supporting fat people if you want to be able to talk about your insecurities. So all the thin people watching, these are required to be able to exist on the internet peacefully.
And they're perpetuating fat phobia by talking about their weight loss being healthy.
This entire 3-minute long stitch could have been 6 seconds if she had just put that clip in. She's talking about all this stuff about body positivity being about civil rights and helping disabled people and blah, blah, blah. But in the end, she's just angry this person said that being at a smaller size is healthier than when they were bigger. Period. The end. All the rest of this explanation was a way of covering up that sentence to make all of this outrage seem legitimate.
So there's something I really want to talk about, and before y'all get upset, I'm not driving. Say hi, Marvin.
Hi.
Every single time a fat person posts on this app about our oppression or our eating disorders, or when we ask thin people to stay out of discussions around size-based oppression unless they are here to support us, we always get the same kinds of response. It's always thin people saying, well, thin people are insecure too. Thin people have eating disorders too. I assure you, every single one of us is painfully aware of that. Because thin people love to project their insecurities onto us. Whenever a thin person is insecure about their body fat or being perceived as fat, that is rooted in fat phobia, which is oppression that they perpetuate against us. The entire world is catered and built around your existence and your insecurities and your eating disorders. When fat people are insecure, when we have eating disorders, do you think doctors listen to us? Do you think people around us listen to us? We are prescribed disordered eating behaviors on a daily basis, and a lot of times for really serious and even fatal conditions that, when they go untreated, could kill us or result in a really low quality of life. Even when we do get help, we have to put up with your fat phobia. I have actual trauma. I have nightmares from fat phobia that was perpetuated against me in treatment settings from both staff and clients. Eating disorders are primarily rooted in trauma. There are very few people with eating disorders that haven't been through trauma. No one trauma is more or less valid than another. However, thin people, you can heal and recover from yours. You can move on and find spaces that are safe for you. Fat people don't have that privilege.
How do thin people have spaces to recover from trauma, but fat people don't? There are support groups for pretty much everything nowadays, especially online, and there is no oppressive structure created so that fat people can't find community with each other, be it in person or online, or going to therapy or anything like that. So I don't understand this.
Fat phobia is a form of trauma. We never get to leave that trauma behind. We have to live with that for the rest of our lives. And this movement, the issues that we talk about, are dedicated to trying to ease the burden of that trauma, both for ourselves and hopefully for future generations. The sect of body positivity, where fat people discuss body size, is the only safe place that we have. It's a place where we can discuss our issues and show each other support. But thin people have intruded on those safe spaces and made it about reassuring themselves that they're not fat. So yes, we have asked thin people to stay out of those spaces. And yes, we are gatekeeping. because your presence in those spaces is harmful. We get that you have insecurities and eating disorders, but we are not your punching bags anymore. Take your insecurities and your fat phobia to therapy or to one of the hundreds of spaces designed for you.
Ain't that the most infuriating thing? Her resentment towards thin people is damn near palpable at the end of that video. And if body positivity is supposed to be a safe space for fat people, why does the community spend so much time policing other groups? This entire video of her talking about this man and how he shouldn't talk about his weight loss is her going into what I would consider another group's safe space and telling them how to act. So body positivity is a place that's supposed to heal trauma of fat phobia, but it's also supposed to allow fat people to police others with no accountability or consequence or criticism because they're recovering from trauma? Is that it? And in the end, she says, take your fat phobia to therapy or to one of the hundreds of spaces designed for you. But it seems like all the spaces that you say are designed for thin people are still open to criticism from you. So again, where are thin people allowed to speak and breathe freely? And in the last video, she said that thin people have to be open to criticism from her. But why should someone have to take a judgmental beating from you just because they're thin and they want to talk about their body on TikTok? This is shameless. With all these rules and outright gatekeeping, this woman is acting like a straight up mobster. Like, this corner of the internet is hers to make all the rules and judgments for, however she sees fit. Like, who do you think you are, making all these rules for people? This is shameless. This is shameless behavior in its entitlement and hypocrisy.
It's one thing if you're making healthier choices for your body, you're eating a variety of foods, you're eating intuitively and practicing joyful movement, and you happen to lose weight. But it's completely different when you are losing weight and specifically associating it with weight loss. That tells me that thinness is their primary goal, not health. The fact of the matter is people in developed countries exist within the context of diet culture, which is a multi-billion-dollar industry that profits off of fat oppression. Every single person who has grown up within that context has at least subconscious fat bias. They probably don't overtly hate fat people, but there is no escaping that bias, and even fat people have it. It's called internalized fat phobia.
The fact that she thinks diet culture and stigma against fat people only exists in developed countries, and that only developed countries have a problem with what she calls fat oppression. First of all, it is much more socially acceptable to be fat in developed nations, particularly the United States, Canada, and the UK, than it is in most developing nations. Have you ever tried being fat in East Asia? And second, because it is much less socially acceptable to be fat in most places in the world, diet culture exists everywhere. There are videos on the internet of Chinese fat camps that are very similar to the setup of what would be considered the Biggest Loser in the United States. So the marketing may be different and the products may be different in different nations, but there are products and services that are meant to get people to lose weight everywhere. And part of the reason is that the weight loss industry is making money, and part of it is that being non-obese is healthier than being obese, so people don't want to be fat.
A day in the life of a fat person with an eating disorder. Fat people, I hope you watch this video and know you're not alone. Thin people, I hope you watch this video and consider all the ways your day might have been different, and think about what that says about thin privilege. Today I went to lunch with my boyfriend, and then we went shopping at Target. First we went to Red Robin. When my boyfriend pulled up to the restaurant, he had to let me out before parking, because I often can't get out of the car when another car is parked next to us. We went and sat down at a table, and my belly was resting just at the edge. I had to ask the server to be moved, and then I saw that there were calories on the menu, which just made coping with my ED so much harder. I spent my time looking at the menu, replaying the two incidents of society communicating to me that I don't deserve to exist, over and over in my head. When we walked into Target, I noticed that the entire left wall and a bit of the middle of the store, about 20% of the entire store, was dedicated just to straight-sized clothes. I headed to the clearance, only to find that the section, which was bigger than my bedroom, had 0 plus-size options. After almost 10 minutes of searching, we found the tiny Ava and Viv shelf next to the fitting room, which was located in the back of the store and was small enough that it could have fit inside my bathroom.
All of these things are not a lack of privilege. Having to get out of a car before parking, yes, parking spots are small, not a fat people exclusive problem. Your belly resting on a table, that is your problem and yours alone. That is a consequence of your size, not thin privilege. And if having calories on menus makes you feel like you are unworthy of living, again, not the world's job to accommodate. That honestly sounds like a mental health issue you should have treated, not something every restaurant and grocery store in the world needs to take into consideration. And she also said that the clearance section was, quote, bigger than my bedroom, and that the plus size section could have fit in her bathroom. I don't know why, but I find this hilarious. I'm going to start measuring spaces based on completely arbitrary references that only pertain to my life. My dog is pretty small. He's about a third the size of my trash can. There's a park near my house and it's about 18 times the size of my bedroom. And because people have asked about my weight, I'll let you in on a secret. I weigh about 3% the size of my car. I know. Scandalous.
I spent 20 minutes finding clothes for myself, most of which were ugly, and the ones that were not carried in my size. I picked out 2 basic shirts, a sweater, and a pair of jeans. I went to the underwear section of the store and could not find my size at all. The tiny plus-size underwear section was conveniently located by the shapewear, communicating to me yet again that to be worthy, I should suck in my belly until I can't eat or breathe.
Oh my god. The dramatics. Having the underwear next to the shapewear means people want you to starve and suffer by sucking in your stomach? Again, if a floor layout of a department store is causing harm to your self-esteem, that's an issue you should deal with. The only way I could see this argument working is if the plus-size section was literally in the store bathroom. Then I'd concede that they might have been making a statement about fat people. Aside from that, it's not that deep.
I walked to the register to pay, again walking past the enormous straight-sized clothing section, and then went home. I was so exhausted, and I tried to relax by scrolling through TikTok, only to be confronted with videos by thin people body checking and reassuring themselves that they don't look like me, and labeling it body positivity. They justify this behavior with their eating disorders, which I also have, and which is severely impacted by their words and their actions. Trying on clothes and eating at a restaurant is difficult for anybody with an eating disorder, but it was made much more difficult by encountering messages over and over that my presence was not wanted, that in order to be deserving of existence, I should engage in disordered behaviors that are seen as a problem and an illness for thin people, but are a prescription for fat people. The phrase thin privilege does not mean that thin people don't have their struggles or that their insecurities are not valid. It means that universally difficult struggles for people with eating disorders are also a battle for fat people to even exist.
Let's just throw the term thin privilege out. Please. I hate it. Eating out at restaurants, having a car to drive around in, and having disposable income to buy clothes for fun is a privilege. There are countless thin people that can do none of those things and whose lives are way harder because of it. And you're telling them that they're privileged for not having their belly hang over a seat at a restaurant that they probably can't even afford to eat at. And that thin people should know how privileged they are for not having to shop in a clothing section next to the shapewear because that's offensive and a sign that society thinks you're unworthy. Inconveniences, slight discomfort, and having to come face to face with your own insecurity is not a lack of privilege. If you think the size of parking spaces and the location of the plus size section in stores are systemic issues meant to hinder your quality of life as a fat person, then you are the one with way too much privilege. Please curb your victim complex for a minute, go touch some grass, and gain some perspective on what real systemic issues are. Because this is not it.
I am not saying that this creator's experiences are not valid, but they are just that, experiences.
Yep, we only got 5 seconds this time because what the There's so much to dissect in that single sentence. First of all, how can you say someone's experiences are valid, and in the next breath say, but they are just that, experiences? You just invalidated their experience right after you said it was valid. And second, are experiences not the basis of all fat activism? My mind is blown at how she justifies going on this long rant about thin privilege because she has to get out of a car before it parks and her belly rests on the table. And yet she tells this dude that his experiences are just experiences and implies that they mean nothing.
I want to talk about what it's like to shop for clothes as a fat person, even just outside of the issue of size inclusivity, because I don't think thin people understand what it's like. Like, it's a totally different experience. So you can see that clothes were just thrown on the ground. There were random clothing items on random racks, and the folded items definitely hadn't been gone through and just like tidied up. And there was even a rack with dresses hanging on the floor. The plus size section was tiny, and the clearance section was right behind it. So there were straight size clearance items sort of like scattered within the plus size section, including a cart full of discarded clearance items that just got in the way. And then this is the straight size section. You can see it's immaculate. There's plenty of space. Even the mannequins' outfits are definitely more like thoughtfully designed. There are plenty of options for every occasion. And there were a few items on the ground, but I could tell that was just like stuff that fell from hangers, nothing that customers really did. It's pretty clear that the straight size section is tidied up throughout the day. And the straight size section was at the front of the store versus the plus size section is always kind of sandwiched at the back of the store.
She said the mannequin outfits in the normal section were more thoughtfully designed, but isn't that completely subjective if an outfit looks good or not? She also said the normal sizes are more tidy than the plus size section, but if that is the case, it's probably because the plus size section is in the back and the normal sizes are in the front. Having worked in retail, I know that managers care a lot more about the front of the store looking good than the back. So if the normal sized clothing section was the first thing people see when they walk into the Target, it makes sense that it would be more well-kept than the back. And I'm sure her response to this would be something like, the fact that the plus sizes aren't in the front signifies how worthless Target believes their plus size shoppers are. But it's really not that complicated. And another thought I had when watching this was that if the plus size section did have more clothes out of place, that just makes me think that more plus-size people were shopping in the store, which is a good thing, right? More people are shopping in the plus-size clothing section. What's the big deal? I don't get why some clothes being out of place is an issue of thin privilege that the world needs to know about. And in the previous video, she talked about how the Target plus-size section was bathroom-sized, but in this video, the plus-size section seems really big, which goes to show that every store is different. So one store having the plus size section next to the shapewear and another one having a small plus size section isn't Target sending a message to all fat people. Stores vary, and that's not a personal attack on you. Let's continue.
And so we are coming up on the swimsuit section. Just the straight size swimsuit section was bigger than the entire plus size section. And I'm not even showing you all the straight size swimsuits. There were even more like across the aisle that cuts through the store. And there's so many different options in varying degree of modesty, but there's no excuse for not having more plus size options.
Oh no, less swimsuit options? The travesty of it all. One thing I will say about this whole swimsuit thing is that there is this strong movement in body positivity and among young women specifically to be more bold when it comes to their clothing options and to defy beauty standards, and that includes plus-size women wearing more revealing clothing. But I think those people forget that they are still in the minority of fat women when it comes to wearing revealing clothing. Like, I have a lot of friends that are plus size, and they would never wear a crop top or a bikini in public. Never. And that is much more the norm than the exception. So Target having a smaller range of swimsuit options for the plus sizes makes a lot of sense because plus size women are going to buy bikinis less than non-plus size women. That's just true. There's less of a market for revealing swimsuits in a size 18 than a size 6.
75% of women in the US wear a size 14, 16, or higher. So this is the Pride section. There were 0 plus size options in store. And again, this section was pretty neat, pretty tidy, pretty well kept. So they only carry plus size Pride merch online. And this is just more footage of the Pride section only going up to an XXL. And there were baby clothes and pet items in the Pride section. They prioritized dogs ahead of fat people. Regardless of your views on fat people and weight loss, we deserve to be treated better than animals.
She did not. She did not just say that pride-themed pet toys means that she's being treated worse than a dog. No, she didn't say that. No. Selling the plus-size items online instead of in stores isn't a brand prioritizing pets or babies over you. I'm pretty sure they thought the plus sizes just wouldn't sell well in stores. Or maybe that store specifically because that's only one Target and there are thousands across the United States. So nothing in this video is universal. But because she was bold enough to bring this travesty to light, I now have the courage to talk about something I've held in for a long time. The fact that collars were created and marketed towards dog owners before prioritizing the BDSM community has harmed me in more ways than one. They prioritized making collars for dogs before they made them for humans. Do you know how that makes me feel? I am a worthy person. I deserve a lot more than this.
We've all heard the studies. Fat people are more likely to have heart disease than thin people. So that means that fat people are unhealthy, right? Wrong. You know what else leads to heart disease? Lack of medical care, stress, and dieting. And you know what's really fucking stressful? Not having access to medical care, clothing, or fair pay, which fat people deal with on a daily basis. And what are we told to do if we don't like how we're treated? Take a guess. We are told to lose weight and to go on a diet. So it almost seems like fat people are more vulnerable to heart disease because of fat phobia, not because our bodies are a disease. But, keep telling yourself that you're not going to die of a heart attack before you're 40 just because you don't look like me. If that's what makes you feel better. Go ahead.
It does make me feel better. Thank you for giving me permission to feel those feelings, Mrs. Fat Babe. I really appreciate it. I find it so strange that she keeps bringing up this not having access to clothing thing as a part of fat oppression because she's shown a Target with racks and racks of clothing in her size. And not only that, but she also bought multiple clothing items during a Target shopping trip. So there are clearly clothes in your size. And fat phobia is not the sole reason obesity increases the risk of heart disease and other illnesses. And you know how I know this? Look back at history. There are many civilizations in ancient and medieval times that knew obesity was unhealthy because they observed it. They may not have had the medical language we have now, but the health risks of obesity have been known in some form or another for millennia. And those were periods of time where most civilizations saw being fat as something that was desirable, because you had to be wealthy to get fat. So if fat phobia is the only reason fat people have more health problems, why were the ancient obese people still observed to be unhealthy?
Today, I want to talk about chairs. In Shrill, written by Lindy West, she recounts an experience in which she has to sit down at a bar with her very fat-phobic boss who lives in a thin body. She gives him an example to try to help him understand fat phobia. She says, if your chair were to collapse from underneath you right now, everybody would say it was because you sat on a broken chair. But if my chair were to collapse from underneath me, everybody would say it was because I'm fat. This connects with disabled fat people. Oftentimes, fat wheelchair users or fat people who use crutches, canes, or scooters in grocery stores are ridiculed and their disabilities are blamed on their fatness. And even if they can't ambulate because they're fat, so what? They're people. They deserve to live their lives. Or when fat people have mental illnesses like depression or eating disorders, we're told to lose weight. These things can put fat people's lives at risk. It prevents us from getting the medical care that we need. So fat liberation cannot exist without advocacy for the disabled.
This TikTok took me on a journey I was not expecting. It started with talking about how it's somewhat fat phobic to assume a fat person's chair collapsing is because they're fat, and then it went on to say that wheelchair users that are fat and disabled have their disability blamed on being fat, and then other health problems like depression are also blamed on weight, and it was a ride all the way through. I kind of see what she's saying, but first of all, I don't think it's fat phobic to assume that a chair breaking under a fat person is caused by their weight more so than a skinny person. It's kind of a natural assumption based on gravity. And I don't like making fun of anyone using wheelchairs or scooters if they're fat or living their lives in public. But the thing that irks me about this TikTok is she's all but saying that being fat and the problems that come with being fat are inextricably linked to disabled people. And I don't think that's true. You can be disabled and fat, but you can be fat for a reason that has nothing to do with your disability. I don't know exactly how to explain it, but I don't like the implication that fat phobia is somehow tied directly to ableism, especially when it comes from someone who has openly said that she could lose weight if she wanted to. Being disabled is not something you choose. It seems like a way of linking the plight of fat people to disabled people in order to legitimize her movement.
This is probably going to make some of you very mad, but today I want to talk about why non-marginalized people, specifically thin people, don't belong in the body positivity movement. Thin people have turned this movement into being about self-love, and that really just highlights how much privilege you have. This movement was never supposed to be about self-love. It was supposed to be about dismantling systems of oppression, specifically racism, fat phobia, and ableism. We can't love ourselves out of oppression. I'm fat and disabled. Just because I love myself, which I do, doesn't mean that I'm somehow shielded from fat phobia or ableism. Start your own movement, call it self-love, but when you call what you're doing body positivity and it's not, you are drowning out voices of the marginalized who have gone unheard for much too long. You're welcome to be an ally, but that means accepting feedback about problematic things that you say and centering the voices of the marginalized, not your own.
Can a thin, disabled woman of color be in body positivity? Does her opinion matter, or is it only if she falls in line with all the other fat acceptance rhetoric? How can a movement that talks all about intersectionality and we support all marginalized people also say that all thin people, who could still have all of the marginalized identities they claim to support, how can you say they don't belong in body positivity? Because it seems like none of that matters if you aren't fat. And this whole we care about marginalized people in this movement, while also drawing the line and keeping thin people out, it really goes to show that fat women are the only thing that matter in fat acceptance to women like her, and all the rest is just lip service. And that's probably why the last clip about ableism really irked me, because they do all this talking about we support disabled people, but then a thin disabled person comes along and they'll openly state that you're not allowed.
Frustration around people assuming you have an eating disorder when you don't is completely different from almost being unalived because doctors gaslighted you into thinking you didn't have one when you did. When thin people center their emotions and experiences in BOPO spaces, it prioritizes their feelings over our oppression.
This is the last clip of that TikTok, and I am so happy to be done with it. She says that she's not invalidating the creator's experience, but then said, your experience of people thinking you have an eating disorder is nothing compared to doctors not believing I had one. That is being dismissive again. You are openly insinuating that this man's problems don't matter and shouldn't be taken as seriously as yours. And this all goes back to her whole body positivity is a safe space for fat people thing. Okay then, why don't you talk about how doctors didn't believe you had an eating disorder in your safe space in body positivity, and let this man talk about his struggles about people thinking he has an eating disorder in what should be his safe space. She goes on and on and on about thin people's place not being in body positivity, but gives no room for anyone else outside of body positivity to voice their problems because she believes their problems aren't as bad as hers. And to end the video, she said thin people shouldn't center their emotions and experiences, which really summarizes how the fat acceptance movement treats anyone who's lost weight. Your emotions and experiences as a fat person are completely irrelevant once you lose weight. All those years you apparently lived with the exact same fat oppression she does means nothing. Imagine how all of this would play out if it was someone who went from being deaf to being able to hear? Would you hear people saying your past experiences as a deaf person mean nothing because you can hear now? That would be so ridiculous. But that's exactly what this woman is doing. That's what this whole TikTok was. But this goes to show that this movement doesn't just dislike you if you've lost weight. They actively hate you and will go out of their way to make sure you know it. And it's all just jealousy. The best word I have to describe this woman is tiring. All she does is complain and project, and complain and project, and then do the things she's complaining about other people doing, and then project. And it is exhausting. I don't think she knows what fun or happiness is. I feel like if I asked her to go out partying with me or to go to a comedy show or something like that, her response would be, laughing is for people who haven't endured the years of trauma that come from living in a larger body. Society tells us day in and day out that we are unworthy of living as fat people, and that's why laughter is something that I really can't. This is what happens when being oppressed becomes your entire personality. You not only lose joy in everything, but you start to look for ways you are oppressed everywhere you go. Parking spots are too small? Fatphobia. Plus size section in the back of the store? Oppression. Store not having my size? My body is unworthy of living in a society. And I can imagine constantly looking for more ways that you are oppressed really has to take its toll on your mental health after a while, because you already have a low self-esteem. But then you find more and more ways every day that society hates you. And that's going to bring your self-worth down even more. And then you're still looking for more ways that you're oppressed and you find them. And that makes you feel even worse. And it's just a terrible cycle to live in. And all this talk about systemic oppression and this movement is for the marginalized, even if you are a marginalized person, sometimes it's good to have space and time to exist outside of constantly harping on the ways you are marginalized. Constantly thinking about the ways society or other people dislike you is a recipe for a sad life. Overall, all this talk about body positivity is for fat people, and you're not allowed to talk about this unless you talk about this, and you're not allowed to talk about this insecurity unless you do this, and you're not allowed to talk about this at all. All of this gatekeeping and rule enforcing makes the internet so much harder to exist in. People deserve to be able to talk openly and freely and to not have to tiptoe around everyone else's insecurities all the time. And people definitely don't deserve to be called fatphobes or bigots for simply talking about their insecurities. Like I said, let people live. All of this internet policing is highly unnecessary. So that's the end of the video. I hope you all enjoyed, and I will see you in the next video.